our YouTube channel and as well on our Facebook page. And John, let me make sure I've got your last name right. Hanson, that's a pretty easy one. I appreciate you being here this morning.
Thank you.
Yeah, John, you are with the West Michigan Underwater Preserve. And I'll be frank with you, I don't know anything about this. And so over the next few minutes, I want you to kind of educate me and the listeners that are watching and viewing this, because you've got my notes say about 345 square miles from Ludington down to Grand Haven that you're covering with the preserve. But first of all, tell me what you do. And how long have you been doing this, too? It's not something that you just joined this past year, right?
Well, that's correct, yeah. I've been diving since high school. Around 68, 69 is when I first put on some scuba gear. And been doing it. Initially, it was on and off, Navy and so on. Life got in the way. But I've been really heavy into it in the last 30 years.
Okay.
And I've been president of the West Michigan Underwater Preserve now. We've been a preserve for 12 years.
Okay.
And
what does that mean when it comes to everything that's underwater under the Great Lakes here?
Correct. The underwater preserves, there's 13 of us, like I said, and we're all kind of under the Michigan Underwater Preserve Council. There's a really great website they have. It's michiganunderwaterpreserves.org.
Okay.
And lots of information. All the preserves are listed, all the shipwrecks. There's various links. But what it is we're preserving the shipwrecks that are on the bottom of the lake. The Underwater Preserve Council first came around in 1980, I believe, and it was to stop people from pillaging the shipwrecks. You know, they're taking the ship's bell and the ship's wheel, and you bring that stuff up, and if it isn't preserved, it just becomes mush or rusted or whatever.
Yeah.
So, and these are underwater museums, each shipwreck.
Yeah, well, we're glad that you're here because I have a ton of questions for you, and hopefully you got some time here. And you said it's very important. We don't want to disrupt these shipwrecks, especially when we know that some of the crew was probably lost with a lot of these too, right?
Very true. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And so and where I guess my question to you is: there's hundreds and hundreds of shipwrecks that are under the Great Lakes. Hundreds probably and more that still haven't been discovered. Is that right?
That is correct, yeah. We're guessing somewhere between 6,000 and 10,000 shipwrecks in all the Great Lakes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure a number of, an exact number for how many have been located. And there's still a lot of shipwrecks to be found. I have a list of over 25 from from Big Sable Point down to Whitehall.
Okay.
And there's a couple I've got some leads on, and I'm looking for.
Oh, my goodness. Well, and one of them that you and I talked about off the air is what you said about 7 miles offshore here, right, in the Ludington area?
Yes, between Ludington and Pentwater, there is a shipwreck called the Comanche. Okay. It was a 68-foot fishing tug, and it was being towed. I'm not sure up to the Sioux or what its actual destination was, to be rebuilt and used as a commercial fishing tug again. It was just in rough shape.
Wow. When you I guess 2-part question. When you come up on these shipwrecks underwater, what's going through your mind? What are those feelings and motions and such like that? And then also, what's going, because you've been part of, or at least in the, you said you have discovered some or rediscovered some items under the Great Lakes, but what's going through your mind when you're approaching these?
On a shipwreck that we know of, you're going to know the history, or I do. I want to know what wreck it was, what happened to it, why did it sink, and then if lives were lost, I mean, it's something that you approach that wreck in a little different, different tone, different feeling. like the Comanche. It was just a fishing tug, and it was overtaken by weather, and it sank. Okay, well, that's just cool to go dive. It's still actually the most intact ship that we have in our preserve.
Oh, really? Okay.
It was a metal ship, so which helps a lot. But I mean, it's a complete. It looks like you could almost float it up, and it would be good again. So
Wow.
it depends on the on the ship.
Is there? I don't know if this is a relevant question, but I'll ask it anyway. Are there ships that the preserve or others out there that they're looking for? Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, is there a list that you have that said, well, these are the ships we want to try to find here in the Great Lakes?
Well, we want to try to find as many as we can. Like I said, I have a list personally. I think I know several friends in the other preserves, and there's certain ones they're looking for. Some they have found already, and they're documenting them before they announce them, that type of thing.
Yeah, and we talked about that just a moment ago on the air, that when a ship is found, it's not it's not what we see in Titanic, right? Where you come up to the top and it's like, oh, we found it. No, it is. There's some time before announcing it, making sure that there's kind of a checklist that you follow, right? That is it the right one? What happened to it and such.
Right, and so when we find one, then we look for. Oh, we'll take measurements, okay? Get dimensions of what it was. Was it a schooner? Was it a bulk carrier? Wood construction, that type of thing. And then look for cargo. It's another key thing. What cargo is maybe still there, and that will help identify it. Because most of them aren't just sitting there with a nameplate on the back anymore.
It's got to be.
They sank in the mid to late 1800s, early 1900s, and. It takes a toll on them.
It's got to be a challenge. Is many of them, when I say preserved, our vision of what they would look like underwater, is it what they look like?
In some cases. Okay. The deeper shipwrecks are less affected by waves and currents, and a little bit less by the zebra mussels, quagga mussels. That's happening a lot on especially the shallower wrecks. Shallower meaning 100 foot or less. Okay. So the deeper ones, sometimes the masts are still standing, and you come down and you see that, and it's just incredible. Most of the ships in our preserve here on the West Coast are broken up. Okay. Our shore and bottomlands go out for such a long ways and just gradually get deeper. And when a ship is in trouble or, weather, what happens is the weather pushes it in, and then it gets hung up in the 40 to 50 foot area, and then the gales of November just tear them apart.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they're mostly, I don't want to say toothpicks, but they're broken up.
Okay. Yeah. What about and don't mind me peppering you with questions. I think that this is very interesting. You started, or you've been part of the preserve 12 years now. Is that right?
Yes, we've been a preserve
12 years. Why do you think? Well, I would assume that it is obviously what we talked about with preserving the ships. But are there other factors why the preserve was put in place there?
Well, the preserve system itself was to protect the ships from, from people taking things off of them. Yeah, and that was the big thing.
Do you still see people pillaging these things?
Well, if we do, we would hope someone would report it. Yeah, and absolutely. There is a 800 number, and you can find that on the MichiganPreserves.org, MichiganUnderwaterPreserves.org site. Okay. So if you hear of that happening, we'd appreciate that reporting. A lot of people do just report of all of a sudden a piece of shipwreck shows up on the beach. And hopefully which they have quite often, contact us, or they contact the preserve council, they contact whoever's closest, and we'll go measure it and try to determine where it came from. But those pieces are still state property.
Yeah.
It's bottomlands. It's owned by the state.
Is it collected by a certain agency, or what happens, dude? Do you know what happens after that?
Usually, it's we're told to leave it in place.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. If you're just joining us, John Hanson, spending some time with us this morning from the West Michigan Preserve, the underwater preserve here and you focus Lake Michigan, basically Ludington to Grand Haven. That's your area. Is there another ship or two in that stretch that is kind of remarkable that it's worth talking about and sharing this morning?
There is 3 ships that went down on the Armistice Day storm of 1940.
Okay. Yeah.
There is a freighter out of Whitehall. It was actually called the State of Michigan, was the name of the name of the wreck, and it was a bulk passenger freighter carrying cargo and people, and it threw a piston rod through the bottom of the ship, and it sank. They threw up a distress signal, and luckily it was right outside of Whitehall, and the Whitehall life-saving crew went out and got everybody off safely.
Good.
On Muskegon breakwall is the Henry Court, and it was a kind of an unusual ship. There weren't a lot of them. I was now I forgot the name of it.
It's okay.
In any case, it tried getting into Muskegon several times, and the weather was so bad, and actually on their last try, a huge wave picked them up and landed them right on the breakwall.
Wow.
And the Muskegon life-saving crew got everybody off safely, except one of the crewmen died in that effort.
Wow.
So, I mean, there's a lot of history here.
And if you had to put some sort of, I don't know if there's a percentage out there, but where are you at when it comes to, your finding as much that you've wanted to, or the preserve has? Are we at about 50% of where you want to be? Are you pretty content of where you're at? What is that like?
Oh, they're always looking. We're always looking for shipwrecks and hoping people will, if they see something. Must have been 15 years ago or so, a gentleman was flying his plane along the shoreline, and water was crystal clear, and he saw it from his plane and reported it.
Wow.
And that's just 5 miles north of Whitehall, and it turns out that ship is the Interlaken was the name of that.
Okay.
Real step back to Muskegon.
Yes.
That was a whaleback. A whaleback freighter.
All right.
I'm sorry.
You got it. No, that's all right. It's okay. John Hanson joining us this morning. John, a couple more questions before we let you go. Is there something other than keeping our eyes out when we're boating or if we're in the air that we can do to support and make sure that you're able to accomplish what you're doing with the preserve from a community standpoint? We're not all divers, we know that, but are there things that we can do?
Yes, that's really appreciate that. Of course, we, as the West Michigan Underwater Preserve, we have a donate button. We take donations. Occasionally, we will do not a GoFundMe, but something like that, on Facebook or whatever. It's a fundraiser. So these buoys, to mark these shipwrecks, these buoys, it runs about $1,000 with hardware, buoy, lights, that type of thing, that are required by the state. And that's all fundraising we have to come up with to do that. The reason for the buoys, one thing, it allows the divers to find the wreck easier. Okay. Or if it's shallow, just people in boats can come and hook up, and they can look, and if it's a clear day, they can see the wreck. I mean, that's really cool. But it saves the shipwrecks from, if those buoys weren't there, people dropping an anchor. And then they hook it. And they break something when the anchor drops, or the anchor pulls something off the ship. So that's another reason for the buoying.
Do you think most of our shipwrecks, well, I don't know if it's a question of do you think, are most of our shipwrecks in more of the shallow waters, or are the deeper waters that are out there?
on our shores here, it's mostly shallow.
Okay, all right.
A lot of the other places along the Wisconsin coast, it gets deeper faster.
Okay.
Or on our Lake Huron shore, that's similar to the Wisconsin shore. That they don't have the sand dunes that we have, and the rivers go straight into the lake, and it gets deep fast. So the wrecks are out in deeper water, and in most cases intact, a little more intact.
These, we always, in the November we're playing this wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald and such. Those more well-known wreckages. Have you ever wanted to dive or see any of those or anything like that?
Well, I'm a recreational limits diver.
Okay.
What that means is we're certified to 130 feet.
Okay.
When you get below that 130-foot mark, you should be into more of the technical diving with mixed gases. And then when you go deeper, you also have a longer time to get to the surface. There's decompression stops. And
because we talk about air in your bloodstream, right?
Correct. Your nitrogen buildup in your blood system.
Correct. Yeah. That brings me to that next question, which is, are there people that might be listening and like, hey, you know what? I want to be a part of this. I want to dive. I want to do this. And if they are, is there steps that they go through? What is that like?
Well, if you're already a certified diver and you want to help or become part of this, please contact me. Through our Facebook page or in any number of ways. Through the Underwater Preserve Council. Yes, we're all of us are looking, for new blood to come help.
And what is that? What does that mean? Do you go out like every weekend? Do you go out a couple times a year? What does that look like?
Well, in the springtime, we go out and put the buoys on the shipwrecks.
Okay.
And so we have 9 that we put buoys on. A couple of them are too shallow to put buoys on. So we have 13, but we only put buoys on 9 of them. And then the other preserves, some have a lot more, some don't have as many. Yeah. But and then in the fall, we have to go and pull the buoys back off. Okay. So there's always that. But then whenever we got free time, hey, let's go dive, this and go dive that, whichever wreck, and yeah, we just enjoy diving in general.
I think it's incredible. I think that's most of my questions for the day today.
If you aren't a certified diver. There's several dive shops around. There's one in Twin Lake, Grand Haven, Spring Lake, and then several in Grand Rapids. You can get certified in, some of them will do it in a weekend. It's like 2 12-hour days, but normally it's like over a week's time, maybe 2 weeks.
Oh, that's pretty cool. All right, I got to ask last question. The highlight, any moment that you just love talking about when talking about the diving and preserving. You were in the Navy, you said. Yeah. That led you to want to try to to do this, and you've been able to accomplish it. But is there anything that jumps out at you that you always like to talk about when it comes to this?
Oh, well, shipwrecks in general, and just the diving. I think going down it's a wreck called the Sandusky, and it's in the Straits of Mackinac, and it was a schooner. I'm not sure if it 2 or 3 masted, but the masts are down, but it's otherwise still pretty much intact, and it's one of the few ships that has a figurehead. And the Great Lakes, hardly any of them had an actual figurehead.
Yeah,
below the bowsprit.
Yeah,
and I mean that's just a cool thing to see.
That's cool. And when you're diving, is it clear? Is it I guess it depends on where you dive and how deep you dive, right?
Yes. The zebra mussels, quagga mussels, have really cleared the water up since the 70s. Okay. You were happy in the 70s to get 10-foot visibility, and now we can. At times, you can go down the line to the wreck, and 100-foot, almost as good as the Caribbean.
Wow.
You can see the entire, but that's not all the time.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Majority of the time, it's minimum of 25 foot to 50 foot.
Okay, that's still a lot to be able to take everything in. That's pretty awesome. John, we appreciate you coming in. We appreciate you telling us about this. I'd love to have you back in the future, talk about some of the shipwrecks, any new finds that you might have, and we appreciate, most importantly, that you are preserving this history. I think that's crucial.
Thank you.
For us to have those conversations. So thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you.
It is just after 10 o'clock here on 102.7 Mom FM and Hot Country Hits 99.9. If you missed any of the segment, check it out in its entirety on either one of our Facebook pages, the Mom FM or the Hot Country Hits Facebook page.